So this is a roadmap presentation. So every good roadmap presentation starts with a disclaimer. And the other point is you make great votes here at the back. Luckily, we have a few hits with what we have planned with the roadmap, but at the end, we also need to analyze what's a hot topic over there and how does it apply to what we thought about the roadmap. So this is not all set in stone. We have spent significant efforts here to make it as good as possible, and we have also kept a few resources left to do things which might show up here, if it's more or if it's different things than what we anticipated for when we need to adapt our roadmap. So before we go into the next year, so 12 months from now, let's look 12 months back. So Jan presented last year at conference number 7 a number of points in innovation, integration, and extensibility. And we want to be honest here and tell you what we have achieved, where we failed. And so you see that we try to stick to our promise. The first thing, innovation, was cloud. So we did it. We actually started with it. It turns out to be more effort. So we decided to make a cut and deliver the 2.1 and do the cloud stuff half a year later. So that's why a gray mark. So we are actually working on it, but it's far from being delivered. The Kubernetes monitoring, I think it's absolutely fair. We have done it. Martin did a great presentation about that one, and it's a great product, so you will have a lot of fun with it using the Checkmk 2.1 version. The same, I think, applies to UX and dashboarding. It wasn't such a big change like we did with one step from 1.6 to 2.0, but still on a lot of bits and pieces, we updated, modified, streamlined processes, UI, naming, all that stuff. And we also added a few features or a number of features here which make life easier in the UI. On the integration side, you heard Marcel talking about our integration with Grafana, InfluxDB, and Datadog. I think that's also a tick. We delivered on what we promised here. And the same applies to the REST API, but not to the full extent you might have expected. As Lars, I think, has presented, and also Moritz, there are two things missing, which we'll follow up in one of the next patch releases. So there's still some work for us to do. That's marked it in this yellowish green. And finally, extensibility, the language thing, I think that's now done. You can translate Checkmk into multiple languages using our webplate, and we also deliver like pre-configured, pre-done translations using DeepL where it made sense for us. And also the extension to the Check API, the clustering, as Moritz also presented, was done. So I think overall we did achieve most of what we have done, so an 80%, which is, I think, a fair mark for a roadmap for the next year, and that's what we target for for this year or the coming year as well. But now let's dive into the areas of innovation we plan for the next year. It's cloud, it's Kubernetes. Usability will remain one of the key topics. We want to become better here, and also noticed here back in the feature request that there's a lot of needs for better UI, better usability. API remains a topic, and we want to extend our API coverage of the product further and further. Synthetic monitoring, you heard the presentation from Simon today, and of course there's this other enhancements, all the other things we do or consider to do here. So let's dive into that one. I mean, I just presented that, so we will finish our cloud journey with a push agent, with the auto-registration, with extended cloud service coverage, and the deployment of Checkmk in the cloud through the marketplace. That's what we plan to do as our improvement to monitor the cloud from the cloud. I think you're next.
Okay, so that has also been recently presented to you by Martin. And so I will only summarize that now for the overview. We want to extend the great Kubernetes monitoring we now have with the 2.1. We want to extend the coverage of other important objects in Kubernetes, for example, the persistent volumes, and also simply address the important platforms we have in the enterprise, which is OpenShift, which needs some special handling to be able to monitor it properly. And the second major topic for Kubernetes monitoring is simply monitoring applications which are running on this platform in form of metrics and also logs. And yeah, that's for the summary, that's about Kubernetes. Then we have the usability part of our roadmap. The first one is something that you will, in the first moment, likely not realize. It's a bigger project we are planning for working under the hood. It's a simply architectural project to improve the architecture that we used for the years under the hood of the user interface. It's a mod VSGI, WSGI application, a Python application, and it's a very huge code base, the biggest component we have in Checkmk. And we have realized that we are at the point where we need to do some structural changes to make it more easier manageable for us, to lay the foundation for future feature developments and make it easier for developers to approach this component, to get an idea how to work with it, how to extend it, how to debug, and so on. And that's not something you will realize in the first moment, but I wanted to wanted to tell you that we are caring for these things to make it easier for us to extend Checkmk in the future and build features in an easier way, simply put. The second one is maybe more interesting for you. If you, for example, connect Checkmk with an AWS account to monitor it, you may have realized that it's harder than it should be. You have to configure several independent things in the setup. You need to configure a host, then configure the special agent, then you need some other rules and add the dynamic host configuration, and then you're done to get AWS things into your monitoring. And I think that's not how it should work. Something like, I want to monitor AWS, here are my credentials, and please monitor it, and then enter, and that's done, would be more useful, and that's something we are thinking about, not only for AWS, but also for other more complex systems which involve special agents and the dynamic host management, like VMware setups or also Kubernetes, could benefit from a solution for making it easier to configure it. Then the third thing is about providing more options for visualizing hardware-software inventory data together with the actual status data of objects. One example, if you monitor multiple Oracle instances from multiple servers and all this in probably different versions, you may want to have an overview, a table overview, one row per instance, and there you want to see the instance name, the version of that instance, and the performance metrics next to it, to be able to easily compare the performance behavior across the versions and instances. So in such a view, you might get an idea what an update could have an impact on the performance of the system or something. So that's to some degree currently possible, but there is clearly room for extension improvement, and that's a direction we want to move into to make more use out of the data we have. The next one is more a nitty-gritty thing. In the setup, we have different user interfaces, different dialogues, where you can select a folder from our folder hierarchy. For example, to move a host from one folder to another, or add a rule to a folder. And if you look at that and look carefully, then you may realize that these are slightly different. There's maybe only a flat list of folders or a tree of folders in one way or the other visualized. And this is really a nitty-gritty thing, but this is also about usability to be consistent in different dialogues, to solve these odds and to give the user a consistent experience, and to make it easier, essentially, to use Checkmk. And that's only one example. We have multiple things in mind we want to improve in the configuration, but also in the status user interface, to make it easier and more fun to use the user interface. Next topic is about APIs, extending Checkmk and connecting with Checkmk. And here we have the things we want to do with the REST API. That's the biggest part we want to add is the site management, basically configuring remote sites in the central site of your environment. So if you spin up a remote site by whatever mechanism, automatically or manually, I don't know, that you can add that automatically using the REST API to the central site to be able to see it right away there. And then also make the connection with that site via live status, do the trust, establish the trust with the remote site so that you can use it right away. And that's really handy for infrastructure as code approaches where you want to specify the setup of your environment in code and API calls. So that's something we are missing currently, and we have had the plan to add it to the 2.1, and we still want to do it. So the current plan is to add it during a later patch release. We simply were not able to deliver it to the current point of time, so we will make it later in the 2.1, but it will come. And then the other addition is that we want to provide data from our graphing system, from the metric system, via the REST API to enable you to connect with it and get metric data out of it, but also to use it in our Grafana connector to switch it over from the web API to the REST API, because we have learned that the web API should be deprecated, so everybody needs to switch over, and so we do. And then the programming APIs. With the 2.0, we have had a great success with the Check API, Check plugin API. And if you're building Check plugins, you will realize that it's not everything to have only a good Check API to build the actual check. You're doing different other extensions like adding check parameters, like adding perform meters or metric definitions, graph definitions, and so on. And these are user interface extensions. And these APIs are not well defined, are in a similar state like we had the Check API before, not clearly documented. They have grown, not been designed. So we want to simply continue the journey to give the Check developer and the partner who builds custom checks a consistent experience to provide consistent APIs across the components and make it easier to extend Checkmk. And since these are multiple APIs, we will start or continuing the journey and go step by step and extend the coverage of these designed APIs. And we are not 100% sure where we will be in the next release, but we will do our best to make it better as soon as we can. So I hope that we can make a full Check development experience much better in the next release. And now I think that's it from me, from the slide set. Yeah, exactly. So, Thomas.
Thank you. Simon talked about the synthetic monitoring, and we will also improve our integration here. Synthetic monitoring is about the offering of tests, the execution, and the presenting of the results. So in the phase 1, which we have well understood and are partly already in development, we will focus on the second two, so execution and presenting. We want to be able to run tests in parallel, and we want to make the deployment of tests to probes to test machines simpler, so that the deployment goes quicker and it pulls all the necessary library together in a very simple stage. And whatever output RobotMK is presenting or creating, we will make that available for presentment within Checkmk. So if something is flagged as red, you don't need to look to another system for all the details. You can see it right here, open up the detailed information, and then you see the full report in the Checkmk UI. So that's phase 1, where we are already, as I said, in a good state when we can deliver it. The phase 2 is about further evolvement, where we are in an early concept phase, where there are a lot of trials, technical trials we need to run. One area we want to focus on is no-code config for available and performance test. Simon mentioned that. So to start synthetic monitoring, the first thing is you need to do is that website available from all the sites I have in my company, as an example, or all the sites where I have customers. So we want to give you that availability data and the performance data as a first step, and it doesn't require a lot of programming. The next thing is, if you need to program for some transaction stuff, then you might want to make it as simple as possible with what's called a low-code offering. It will be not a no-code offering, just to be clear, but everybody should be able, or most of you admins should be able to write such tests. We will also look into a way to distribute the tests across the globe and provide the infrastructure, so you just tick a few boxes of where you want the tests run, and we take care of the rest. And finally, we want to deliver better dashboards, graphs, reports. So whatever we do here, of course, you want to monitor. For example, if you monitor availability from multiple locations, you want to see if there are any deviation trends, or like overnight it's getting better or worse, whatever. So that's all important, so you can really drill in and see where you are, how it's evolving. So that's all coming with the synthetic monitoring. And the last thing is what's called other enhancements. And the lucky thing I see here is, for example, the extended label filtering. That's the and or not thing, which I mentioned today in my first talk as an example. And at least, and I'm just checking. Okay, so on the feature portal I mentioned this morning, this is the highest voted thing at the moment. So let's see how it evolves. But it has 28 votes. The next one, 23 votes, is support piggyback data from remote hosts. And the other one is add a register role from a colleague of us. So you see it's already working, the portal, and luckily we have anticipated that one as the first feature in our enhanced list, so that's quite nice. The second one is not on the list, I think it's not even on the portal, but our feedback from users of the BI was that BI is like a very often changing thing. And one of the challenges is how do you identify changes which come in between the infrastructure to become visible in the BI, because like if certain things are happening, it's not necessarily clear to you that something has changed if you look just at the BI aggregations. So what we want to do is a feature where you can set up the BI and freeze that state. And from that point on, you always do a comparison of that known good state against the actual BI and mark any deviations from it. Because in a large environment, you might actually happen that machines are going away or reconfigured or whatever, and you wouldn't just notice if you look at the BI level. So that's a feature we also plan to do in the next major release. We also look at the event console performance. So feature set apparently is quite good, but we get a number of requests about the performance, especially in large environments, so that's something we need to spend some effort on. And finally, we do a lot of checks. So Cisco Meraki, a nice thing here, I also noticed, it's something we are approaching an end, so there's still a few things to sort out, but we have already like a first running version of an agent. But I also noticed that it's quite hot in the feature votes in the back, so it's quite a match. We also monitor from servers now to mobile devices via an integration of Mobile Iron. That was one of a custom requests, but this is also quite nice if you're using those mobile devices, for example, Android devices in stores, so you might actually want to monitor them as well, get a full picture of your IT on site. And of course, there are many more enhancements and many checks coming, which we don't yet know, including what you have voted here or the top votes of the feature portal. So we will report next year about this one. With that, some questions.